All right, let's begin our show with what happened in the Supreme Court. The Waqf case came up today in the top court. The CGI-led bench passed an interim order. If you're confused by what this order means, how does it alter the Waqf Act provisions, I've got you covered. Let me begin by breaking down for you the top 5 takeaways of the Supreme Court order today. The first most important one is that in the Supreme Court's interim order, they've said no change to existing Waqf assets. What does this exactly mean? It means that no asset, even if disputed, can be cancelled right now. So there's a stay on that. Effectively, what this means is whatever changes have been brought into the Waqf Act with the reform that the Modi government brought in, a pause has been hit on any of that coming into effect per se. No change to registered Waqf assets. Now, no action can be taken. There can also be no check, no scrutiny of registered properties till the next hearing. Remember that part of the Waqf Act also talks about checking right now all of the Waqf properties with the collector directly being involved. Clearly, the Supreme Court in its interim order has a no change to registered Waqf assets. But also, mind you, the previous point that I said, whatever status of the Waqf property, there can be no change whatsoever. Now, let's take you through also the next takeaway. There'll be no new appointment made to the Waqf boards for the time being till the next hearing of the Supreme Court. So this isn't something that goes on for months together. It's just a matter of a few weeks. So what that will translate to is the government's reform in the Waqf boards, which spoke about bringing in non-Muslims as well. That can't happen for the time being because currently, as the Waqf board stands, there are only Muslims. And there are no changes, means essentially no non-Muslims can be brought in. So that change, again, pause hit by the Supreme Court. Now, takeaway number 4. No stay on the Waqf law. This is something that the centre will consider to be a win because there were multiple petitions that said stay this law, ensure it doesn't come into effect till there's some clarity really on what the Supreme Court thinks. In its interim order, the top court has said there's no question of staying this law. All changes made to the Waqf Act with, in fact, the provisions that were made with the Waqf Amendment Bill that was brought in Parliament a few weeks ago, all those changes remain. Takeaway number 5, the government gets 7 days to file a reply. After those 7 days, then you'll have the Supreme Court taking up this issue. Till then, the interim order stays. So there will be no changes till the government replies. No stay on the Waqf law, but at the same time, no action also that the government can take. The next 7 days, nothing really will move in this particular act with regards to a crackdown on properties by the government, or for that matter, a stay on the law. I'd like to bring in our legal editor, Nalini Sharma, to explain for us really the repercussions of this interim order that's come in from the Supreme Court. Nalini, there are mixed opinions that are coming in, mixed reactions coming in to this order. Some deeming it a setback to the centre, others saying not really because there's no stay on the Waqf law. How do you read what happened in court today?
Well, Akshita, whatever's happened before the Supreme Court 3-judge bench headed by the Chief Justice of India over the course of the past 2 days, that's yesterday and today, has been really significant when it comes to this particular Waqf law and the opposition that was given to this law once it was enacted. Most importantly, Akshita, the Supreme Court acted with alacrity. That means that soon after the petitions were filed, they were listed for hearing, and soon after they were listed for hearing, an interim order was pronounced after hearing the preliminary arguments. In case the Supreme Court had kept the matter pending for a long time, then it would have effectively become infructuous, the fact that the petitioners were asking for a stay, an interim stay on the law till the time that the Supreme Court's hearing the matter. So it comes in as a big relief to the petitioners that the Supreme Court has found some prima facie ground on the basis of the arguments that were made by the petitioners yesterday and decided that some steps need to be taken, some intervention needs to be done so that the centre holds its hands when it comes to enacting certain provisions of this contentious act that the petitioners have been raising time and again. Like you correctly pointed out, the concepts of Waqf by user, the concept of inclusion of non-Muslims into the Waqf boards and Waqf councils have been some of the major issues regarding the petitioners that have even been brought up before the Supreme Court, on which some very pointed questions were asked to the centre. Today, even though it was the Solicitor General who'd given his assurance to the Supreme Court that the government will hold its hands on all of these contentious provisions, there'll be no development that'll be done so that there's no drastic change on the ground and the status quo will more or less be maintained. It is important to clarify that if it wasn't for the Supreme Court's intervention, the government would have never come to this discussion table where they would have even agreed to take such a step to hold their hands at least for some time. So even though it's only till the 5th of May and the further hearing is going to happen on the 5th of May, which is when we are going to know how the case will proceed further. But until then, it's going to be a huge sigh of relief to all the petitioners and all the stakeholders who were opposing this contentious law, stating that it's against the rights of the Muslim minorities and it's taking away their religious freedom under Article 26.
So there's no stay effectively on the law, but several provisions, the most contentious ones which were challenged by these petitions, they've essentially been stayed in a way with the Supreme Court saying that, look, there can be no changes, no scrutiny, none of that. Thanks very much, Nalini, for joining us with those details. One term that you very often hear every time this issue of Waqf comes up, and it's one of the biggest bones of contention, is the term Waqf by user. What exactly does this mean? Why is it one of the biggest clash points? So first, there's a distinction. Let's change that up for you and talk about really what Waqf by user is. It's defined by Islamic fiqh law. By Islamic law, it's property that an individual voluntarily offers to the Waqf board for charitable or religious purposes. But in some countries, like India, that definition varies. Property that was not formally declared as Waqf, but has been used over time for religious or charitable purposes, and therefore the Waqf board assumes it to be Waqf. So a plot of land that's been used as a mosque for decades, for example, even though it was never legally transferred as Waqf, is recorded as Waqf by user or Waqf by use. Essentially, the board using that property, so it becomes Waqf property. This concept was legally recognized through court rulings and also the Waqf Amendment Act of 2013. So what did the Supreme Court say on this? Well, Waqfs, including Waqf by user, registered or declared by notification, are not to be denotified. And I'll come to this in just a bit. The characters are not to be changed. Essentially, there will be no denotification. What does that mean? And I'll start off from the very beginning of this graphic. A stay on notification is essentially the disputed Waqf land cannot be touched. The government can't take land claimed by Waqf even if it is disputed. That's important. Even disputed land at this point cannot be touched. Nothing can change. Status quo essentially is what has been decided. And that's what we mean by denotification and the fact that there's a stay on it. No action can be taken by the government, at least for the next 7 days. And then you'll have the next hearing coming up in the Supreme Court. Let's talk about really the debate over the Waqf law, the concerns that have been raised and what the Supreme Court has had to say on these. Now, the petitioners raised a number of issues. One of the issues, can heritage sites be declared as Waqf? Now, petitioners had one aspect to this. They said that this kind of a reform affects historic masjids like Jama Masjid, for which, because it was in fact centuries ago declared as Muslim property, as Islamic property, there are no papers to back it. So it's not registered property. Does that mean there'll be a crackdown on Jama Masjid? The Supreme Court said very clearly that can't be the case. Monuments are already protected. Such clauses will not apply in this case. Another issue, does the law violate personal inheritance rights? With regards to inheritance, can the government now intervene, saying nothing doing? Private individuals cannot go ahead and hand over property. So the petitioners allege that this is interference in Muslim inheritance practices and in our religious law. So the Supreme Court on this also said very clearly that the Parliament can make laws for all, not just for Muslims, but also for Hindus as well, which we've seen previously on this. Now, can Waqf exist without formal documentation? And this is something that the government has spoken about, saying that Waqf by user has been exploited, has been used, and that's why there's a need to ensure that that doesn't happen. Petitioners, however, have said that oral or user-based Waqf may be excluded from these terms and conditions. The Supreme Court said that there must be legitimacy, because otherwise there could be bogus claims, which is what the government also has maintained. So the Supreme Court has said that this kind of a deed ensures legitimacy and transparency. Now, can land owned by scheduled tribes be Waqf, one of the other issues that came up in the top court. Now, the petitioners allege that this particular clause is exclusionary when you talk of scheduled tribes. Now, the Supreme Court has said that as far as tribal laws go, there's no question of discrimination or it being particularly targeted. It's protected by other laws nationwide as well. So these are some of the issues that the Supreme Court has ironed out very clearly their stand on. So all of these issues that the petitioners brought up, the Supreme Court said there's no reason to worry. Let's get you some of the reactions coming in.
The important thing to note is, which is very important, that this order is an order by consent of the Solicitor General. It is based upon the voluntary assurance given by the Solicitor General that we will not take certain decisions. So the idea is to make it clear the import of the Supreme Court's interim order. It is only an order to secure a fuller hearing on the next date of hearing after the Government of India has filed its detailed response.
This is not reform. It is retaliation in the guise of reform. It is retaliation meticulously scripted, strategically timed, and constitutionally questionable. The Waqf Amendment Act is not an exercise in efficiency as it pretends to be. It is an exercise in erasure. Behind the bland language of governance lies the bold ambition of control. Religious autonomy is being reduced to state-administered protocol, and community rights are being redrawn with bureaucratic pens. Let us be clear, this is not about improving institutions. This is about infiltrating them, controlling them, and closing them.
The stand taken by the India Alliance and especially Congress Party has been totally justified by the preliminary observation of the Supreme Court. The speakers of India Alliance during the debate on Waqf Bill clearly emphasized the violation of Article 26 through this bill. Through the preliminary observation clearly stated that the concerns raised by the parliamentarians of India Alliance was relevant.
The Supreme Court has said that the Central Waqf Council and the State Waqf Board will not be constituted. Waqf by user cannot be deleted. Now, there are other provisions also which we as a party have come to the Honorable Supreme Court that calling it unconstitutional. Now, whenever it will be heard, our counsel, Mr. Nizam Pasha, on behalf of me, will be arguing it.
आज जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने आदेश दिया, इंटरिम स्टे जो दिया, वो बल्कि उससे भी अच्छा था जो कल स्टे करने जा रहे थे, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट ने अंडरटेकिंग दिया, कमिटमेंट दिया है कि अब वक्त में किसी भी तरीके से कोई परिवर्तन नहीं होगा, न उसके टाइटल में होगा, न उसकी ज़मीन को लिया जाएगा, न ही बोर्ड में कोई नियुक्ति होगी। तो एक तरह से हमारी विन विन सिचुएशन है, एक हमारी अधूरी जीत हम मान सकते हैं। आगे क्या होता है नहीं समझ में नहीं कहा जा सकता, लेकिन फ़िलहाल के लिए एक राहत है, काफ़ी बड़ी राहत है।
हम सुप्रीम कोर्ट का तमाम जजेस का तहे दिल से शुक्रगुजार हैं कि आज हमें यहाँ इंसाफ मिला। हम तमाम वकीलों का, जो वकील भी पेश हुए, हमारे वकील और तमाम सीनियर वकील, वो सारे वकील पेश हुए, उन तमाम वकीलों का हम शुक्रगुजार हैं। और हमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट से यही उम्मीद थी